1985. DEA agent Kiki Garena was on the brink of dismantling the powerful Guadalajara cartel, but his investigation came to a brutal end when he was kidnapped and murdered. Now, little did the cartel leaders realize, this act would soon bring them all to their knees. These are 5 cartels who messed with the wrong people. Number 5. Hipólito Mora. 2013. Frustrated with the increasing cartel activity in his town of La Aduana, Michoacán, Hipólito Mora Chavez, a Mexican farmer, decided to take matters into his own hands by forming a vigilante self-defense group to combat the notorious Knights Templar cartel. This cartel had been causing chaos in the region with kidnappings, threats, and controlling the lime industry that local farmers depended on for their livelihoods. But what really pushed Mora over the edge was when the cartel forbade his son from picking lemons on their own farm. And that's when Mora decided enough was enough. He took it upon himself to wage a relentless war against the cartel, even without any assistance from outside sources. In the end, he and his group of vigilantes successfully expelled the cartel from Michoacán. His bravery and dedication caught the attention of the federal government, and he soon found himself developing close relationships with senior military officials and the federal police. His collaboration with them became crucial in locating laboratories involved in the production of synthetic drugs, which ultimately led to the arrest of several drug traffickers. After expelling the cartel out of Michoacán, many fighters moved to other parts of Mexico to resume their fight against the cartels, but Mora decided to remain in his hometown, tending to his lime groves. 2014, he changed his mind when a lot of turbulent events took place within the Autodefensas, the name given to the self-defense groups. Many prominent leaders were arrested, while others chose to strike deals with the authorities, limiting their power. As a result, Hipólito felt he had to step forward and take charge. However, at that time, Mora wasn't the only one vying for leadership. Luis Antonio Torres, also known as El Americano, had formed his own group of vigilantes and desired control as well. However, Mora strongly opposed El Americano taking the lead. Why? Well, Mora accused him of working with the Knights Templar, and he made a solemn vow to do everything in his power to prevent him from gaining control. However, as that rivalry grew more intense, tragedy became unavoidable. December 16, 2014, a 2-hour gun battle erupted between gunmen from the 2 rival vigilante groups. The clash resulted in the deaths of 11 individuals, including 6 followers of El Americano and 5 of Mora's group, which included his own son. Even though Mora suffered the heartbreaking loss of his son, he never gave up and continued his fight against the cartels, both on the battlefield and through the media. He also actively engaged in politics, consistently advocating for stricter laws against the cartels. June 29, 2023, Mora was killed in a brutal armed attack. He was ambushed and shot while traveling in an armored truck, which was later set ablaze. Now, who killed him and why? Well, there was this other leader of the Autodefensas known as Nicolas Sierra Santana, aka El Gordo. Originally, El Gordo was a member of a faction within the Knights Templar cartel. However, he switched sides and joined the Autodefensas when he witnessed the decline of the Knights Templar's influence. Now, eventually, El Gordo, along with numerous former Autodefensas, decided to form their own drug cartel called Los Viagras. This cartel had since gained notoriety for its connections and rivalry with the infamous Jalisco New Generation cartel. Now, back to the important question: how was he involved in Mora's death? Although no immediate arrests were made after the attack, different versions quickly emerged regarding the potential culprits. This was mainly because Mora had a strong belief that he might be assassinated. During a conversation with a journalist, Mora said that Los Viagras had declared war on him. This was in response to Mora's decision to disclose the location of several drug laboratories to the Ministry of Interior. On top of that, Mora and El Gordo had a history. Mora despised him. El Gordo had betrayed the Autodefensas and became a part of the very thing they were fighting against. Also, according to Guadalupe Mora, the sister of Hipólito, it seems that the National Guard, the Civil Guard, and the Army were somehow involved in her brother's murder. She claims that during the attack, there wasn't a single soldier or patrol in sight. And well, guess what? El Gordo was known for manipulating the police to do his dirty work. April 2020, the Secretary of National Defense arrested El Gordo's right-hand man, La Sirena, but they had to release him when a group of cars carrying many of El Gordo's men stopped their convoy on the highway. But believe it or not, El Gordo had managed to avoid any charges in connection with Mora's murder until now. Now, the son of the next person on this list was also killed by a rival cartel, but what his father did in retaliation was way beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Number 4. Manuel Torres Felix. 2008, when the son of the notorious drug lord LM1 was killed by a rival cartel, his father completely lost it and went on this violent rampage, sparing no one. The 1990s, Manuel Fidel Torres Felix first joined the Sinaloa cartel. He quickly climbed through the ranks, eventually reaching the top after his brother Javier Torres Felix, who led one of the cartel's factions, was arrested. He then began to work with Ovidio Guzman Lopez, the son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Mexico's former most wanted man. Together, they oversaw drug trafficking shipments coming from South America into Mexico. Now, during this time, the Sinaloa cartel and the BLO used to be allies, operating in the same small state of Sinaloa. 2008, things changed when the Beltran Leyva organization broke away from this alliance. Their motivation? Good old-fashioned greed. Both cartels were hungry for ultimate power, and there was no other option but for one of them to fall. LM1, being one of the prominent leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, was caught in the middle of this fierce rivalry. This would eventually lead to the most defining moment in his life, which sent his world into a spiral. April 18th, 2008, just outside the health ministry in the Montebello residential district of Culiacan, a group of sicarios working for the BLO ambushed LM1's 20-year-old son, Torres Acosta, along with his little sister Alondra and LM1's sister-in-law, Rivas Heredia. The sicarios tried to kidnap Torres Acosta, but he fought back, which led him to brutally shoot and kill him right then and there. The shots fired also injured the sister, hitting her right arm and shoulder, while the sister-in-law got wounded in the left leg. This incident flipped a switch in LM1's head. He went mad and decided to go on a bloody killing spree. Now, a few days after the loss of his son, LM1 ordered his men to gather as many members of the BLO as they could and bring him to his ranch for a horrifying purpose. It was during this time that his sick, psychotic nature came to light. He subjected each man to unspeakable torture before ultimately taking their lives. Now, one of his victims was the municipal police commander, Roberto Carlos Barcelo Villagran. LM1 ordered for his back to be sliced to ribbons with knives, and his legs were cut off before he was beheaded. That body was then dumped with two others in a trunk of a car, while his sicarios took the other bodies and dumped them all around Culiacan. Pop quiz: how many men did he kill in total? Maybe you were thinking 2 to 3, maybe 5 would have satisfied him. Let me tell you, it didn't. In fact, for every man he killed, his thirst for blood only grew stronger. It's believed he tortured and killed over 30 different sicarios belonging to BLO by his own hands, and ordered the killing of hundreds more. Eventually, LM1 earned himself the nickname El Ondeado, meaning the crazy one. Before long, the city of Culiacan started to resemble this chilling scene out of a horror movie. The streets were tainted with blood, and lifeless bodies were in every corner. In response, the Mexican government sent 2,000 soldiers to stop this violence, and eventually they would catch up with LM1, who was making a lot of effort to evade capture. October 13th, 2012, LM1 was killed in a gun battle, finally putting an end to his reign of terror. Number 3. Miriam Rodriguez. January 23, 2014. Everything changed for Miriam when her daughter Karen was kidnapped and murdered by members of Los Zetas. After this tragic event, Miriam dedicated her life to finding and bringing down every single one of those kidnappers. During that relentless pursuit of justice, Miriam went through great lengths. She changed her appearance, staked out homes of cartel members, and spent countless hours digging through social media for any possible leads. But how did it all begin? January 23, 2014, while Karen Alejandra Salinas Rodriguez was driving through San Fernando, two trucks suddenly pulled up beside her. Then armed men forcefully entered her car and quickly drove away with her. The weeks following that abduction were nightmarish, blurs of phone calls, threats, and empty promises. The family followed every instruction, desperately hoping for Karen's safe return. Karen's father would even drop off a bag of cash near a health clinic, only to wait in vain at a local cemetery for the release, but nothing happened. With no other options left, Miriam made a daring move. She requested a meeting with the cartel, and to her surprise, one agreed, although he claimed he didn't know Karen's whereabouts. He offered to assist for a fee of $2,000. Miriam would pay this amount, unfortunately leading to nowhere. But she learned one thing: the name of the cartel member who had met her, Sama. With every failed attempt to rescue her daughter, Miriam's despair deepened. Finally, one morning, weeks after the last payment, she came downstairs and confided in Azalea, her other daughter. She admitted that she had come to the painful realization that Karen would never return, and that she was likely dead. Determined to seek justice for her daughter, Miriam vowed never to rest until she found those responsible for Karen's abduction, promising to hunt them down one by one until her last breath. With meticulous deductive skills, Miriam began piecing together a puzzle surrounding her daughter's kidnappers. First, she would find Sama's account on Facebook, managing to identify one of his acquaintances through her distinctive ice cream shop uniform. Miriam would then wait outside the store for hours until Sama finally showed up, and then she followed him home. However, she knew that simply having his location wouldn't be enough to force the police into action. Miriam needed more information, and to obtain it, she had to get close. She would cut her hair and dye it red, ensuring that Sama wouldn't recognize her. To further the disguise, she put on a government uniform she'd kept from her previous job at the health ministry. She then spent an entire day pretending to conduct a neighborhood survey, gathering basic details about Sama. She then went to the authorities, local, state, and federal, but none would help her. Miriam refused to give up, and eventually, she found a federal policeman willing to assist.
When she put her files onto the table, I'd never seen anything like it,
said the officer who remains an active duty commander. Although Sama managed to evade arrest at first, he was eventually arrested. Under pressure, he gave police names of other cartel members, who later shed even more light on Karen's abduction. One even agreed to take the police to the ranch where she had been killed. While at the ranch, Miriam found some important evidence: Karen's scarf, a cushion from her truck, and even one of her femurs. But Miriam refused to stop here. She continued her pursuit of justice, and she managed to track down and bring to justice a total of 10 cartel members involved in her daughter's kidnapping. Throughout her journey, Miriam seemed to understand the risks involved, yet she kept pushing forward. She once said,
"I don't care if they kill me. I die the day they killed my daughter. I want to end this. I'm gonna take out the people who hurt my daughter, and they can do whatever they want to me."
Tragically, her words would prove to be prophetic. March 2017, a group of 29 inmates managed to dig a tunnel and escape from a prison in Ciudad Victoria, where Karen's kidnappers had been imprisoned. Fearing for her safety, Miriam reached out to the authorities and requested police protection. The local police agreed to provide patrols to ensure her safety. However, 2 months later, on the same day Mexico celebrates Mother's Day, danger had finally caught up with her. The 57-year-old was limping up to her front door on crutches, having recently broken her foot while chasing after a suspect. It was then that a white Nissan, driven by the escaped inmates, pulled up in front of her house. Without warning, they shot at her multiple times before quickly fleeing the scene. Her husband had discovered her sprawled in the driveway, clutching her purse where she kept the pistol. That brutal attack on Rodriguez enraged people across the state and prompted authorities to intensify their efforts to find her killers. While the government managed to apprehend 2 of the culprits and one was killed in a gunfight, many others remained at large. Unfortunately, in Mexico, Miriam's story is too common. What's different here is that when her daughter was kidnapped, she decided to take immediate action and would fight with all her might to bring justice for her daughter, even at the cost of her own life. Number 2. Kiki Garena. February 7th, 1985, 4 to 5 cars filled with armed men were positioned outside the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara, Mexico, waiting for DEA agent Kiki Garena. Once he stepped out of that consulate, the men, who were part of Mexico's most notorious drug cartel, kidnapped him in broad daylight at gunpoint. That was the last time anyone but his kidnappers would see him alive again. The 1980s. The Guadalajara cartel was in its prime. Its size and reach were unlike any other drug organization in Mexico, and its network of corruption spanned the entire country. The masterminds behind this massive syndicate were Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo, Rafael Caro Quintero, and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo. The DEA knew the cartel was responsible for smuggling thousands of tons of marijuana throughout Mexico and into the U.S., and so breaking the cartel's distribution network was Agent Garza's #1 priority in Guadalajara. He was dead set on bringing him down, no matter what it took. November 14th, 1984, the Mexican army, with the aid of the DEA, launched a massive operation to burn Rancho Búfalo, which was a thriving operation for the Guadalajara cartel that produced billions of dollars per year in revenue. The raid resulted in the total destruction of 5,000 metric tons of marijuana, worth $2.5 billion, making the Rancho Búfalo raid the DEA's largest drug seizure. But who was responsible for this raid? None other than Agent Garena himself, and that made him the cartel's #1 target. He hadn't only humiliated them, but their once unshakable grip on the drug trade was now slipping through their fingers, and they were determined to make him pay. February 7th, 1985, Kiki stepped out of that U.S. consulate, looking forward to having lunch with his wife. Taking the cartel for granted, a group of armed men were waiting for him. They surrounded him, forcefully pressing a gun against his side. Then they pushed him into the backseat of one of their vehicles and drove away. They took him to a large house at 881 Lope de Vega, where around 50 to 60 people, politicians, government officials, and narcos were all celebrating the kidnapping of the agent. For 2 days, Garena was mercilessly tortured, beaten, and burned. Men would constantly stomp on his back and chest. They also brought in a doctor to revive him, giving him drugs that would keep him conscious during the torture. But ultimately, Agent Garena succumbed to his injuries. They wrapped his body in plastic and buried him in a nearby park. Caro Quintero was thrilled that the agent was killed, but his partners knew that a dead agent wasn't gonna sit well with the U.S. During an interview, Felix Gallardo said that they never intended to kill Garena, as whoever would kill an agent had to be a madman, willing to have the full force of the U.S. government brought down on him. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The U.S. government put unbelievable pressure on the Mexican government to find the people responsible for their agent's tragic demise. And to get the message across loud and clear, then President Ronald Reagan completely shut down the border between the U.S. and Mexico, which effectively compromised Mexico's economy. So the Mexican authorities knew they had to do something. A month after the abduction, the body of Agent Garena was found by DEA 70 miles outside of Guadalajara. Many things made the department suspicious of this discovery. It was immediately noted that there weren't any grave sites in the area where the bodies were found, and no body fluids were there either. The forensic team would find out later that the soil was different from that removed from the body, so it concluded the body had been buried elsewhere, exhumed, and transported to the new site. The DEA believed that the Mexican drug lords, with the help of corrupt Mexican officials, fabricated a plan because of the heat being put on them by the U.S. government. This scheme fueled their anger even more, and Operation Leyenda, or Legend, was put in motion, which is, to this day, the largest DEA drug and homicide manhunt ever undertaken. Special Agent Hector Bereyes was put in charge of the case, and he eventually cracked it with the help of his large network of Mexican informants. Evidence was gathered, arrests were made, and everything led to Felix Gallardo and Caro Quintero. April 4th, 1985. Quintero was the first to be arrested in Costa Rica and was extradited to Mexico. 3 days later, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo was arrested by the Mexican army in a Puerto Vallarta villa. Felix Gallardo was later arrested as well, and all three founders of the Guadalajara cartel were charged with the kidnapping and murder of Garena and sentenced to 40 years in prison. And number 1, Aljo Garza Damez. November 13th, 2010, Don Aljo, a 77-year-old man, was given an ultimatum by Los Zetas to vacate his ranch in 24 hours, or else he would face death. Looks like the cartel definitely underestimated Don Aljo, who wasn't the type to surrender without a fight. 1933, Damez was born in Nuevo León, Mexico. Growing up, he learned the importance of hard work and living an honest life. As he entered adulthood, he had already built a strong financial foundation. With this in mind, he decided to invest in 2,000 hectares of land in Tamaulipas, Mexico, and named it San Jose. The San Jose ranch quickly became Aljo's pride and joy, bringing him great fortune. And so, when his ranch was threatened, he was willing to go to any lengths, even risking his life to protect it. November 13th, 2010. The 77-year-old Don was minding his own business, overseeing his workers on the ranch, when several gang members showed up and ruined his peaceful day. Those men belonged to none other than the notorious Los Zetas gang, and as you might have guessed, they weren't around for a friendly chat. Their message was crystal clear:
get out of your ranch within 24 hours or face the consequences.
Naturally, the cartel members expected him to give up and hand over his ranch without a fight, but what he did next was beyond their wildest imagination. When Los Zetas told him he had 24 hours to get his things in order before they would return and kill him if he was still on his property, Don Aljo's response was,
"I'll be waiting for you."
He decided he wouldn't hand over his land to organized crime without a fight. Without wasting any time, he gathered his workers and told them to not show up the next day. He just couldn't risk their lives. He would then get the ranch ready for the impending battle, making sure to gather all the firearms he owned. Despite the strict gun laws in the country, the Don fought to obtain permits to a sizable collection of hunting rifles, as if he knew that one day he'd have to put those skills to use in a matter of life and death. For the next few hours, he meticulously cleaned and set up each firearm he owned, ranging from pistols to high-powered rifles. He strategically positioned weapons at every door and window of his ranch, transforming that house into a fortified military barrack. And true to his word, Don Aljo patiently awaited the arrival of the cartel. November 14th, 2010. Shortly after 4 a.m., a convoy of trucks arrived at the ranch. The heavily armed men got out of their vehicles and surrounded the ranch, clearly aiming to intimidate anyone inside the house. As a final warning, they fired into the air, probably expecting no one to be home and for the operation to go down without a single drop of blood spilled. However, what was supposed to be an easy takeover turned into an hours-long battle. As soon as they got there, bullets rained down on them from the windows. It caught him off guard, so they quickly took cover and fired back, believing that they'd walked into an ambush. They thought this old man had gathered all his men inside this place to defend the ranch. How could they have known Don Aljo was running from window to window, shooting at him? He made it seem like there were a lot of people in that house, making it difficult for the attackers to predict where that next bullet was coming from. The cartel even threw grenades in this place, but the shots kept coming from inside, and more of their men kept falling. Looking around, the cartel members realized they were dropping like flies. As the morning hours continued, the gunmen knew the firefight would have alerted the authorities. So they decided to not seize the property and quickly fled away, leaving 6 of their own behind. And they were right. The Mexican Marines had arrived shortly after their departure, only to be greeted by a horrifying sight. The property was littered with over 1,000 shell casings, and the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder. Outside the house, they discovered 4 lifeless bodies while the remaining 2 were unconscious. And as the Marines entered the house, they were left speechless. There lay the lifeless body of Don Aljo, a 77-year-old man who had single-handedly taken down 6 gunmen. Don Aljo fought with the same dignity, courage, and honor as the best soldiers out there. And so he became a cultural hero, praised for standing strong against those who, if not stopped, would bring chaos and destruction to the world.